On February 10, 2025, President Donald Trump officially implemented a sweeping 25% tariff on all imported steel and aluminum entering the United States, a move anticipated to reshape global trade dynamics significantly. The announcement came during his flight to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, marking a dramatic escalation in his administration's trade policies. Immediate reactions from trade partners. The primary impact of these tariffs is expected to be felt by Canada and Mexico, the largest exporters of steel and aluminum to the U.S. Canadian Premier Doug Ford reacted strongly, labeling the tariffs as chaotic and harmful to the Canadian economy. He emphasized the deep economic ties between the U.S. and Canada, with many jobs in the U.S. reliant on Canadian imports. Political advisor Catherine Loubière echoed these sentiments, stating the interconnected nature of the two economies could lead to severe repercussions. Trump hinted at potential reciprocal tariffs, indicating that if countries retaliated against U.S. goods, similar measures would be applied in return. However, he did not specify which countries would be targeted or if any exemptions would be granted. Market responses. In the financial markets, shares of U.S. steel manufacturers surged following the announcement. Companies like Cleveland-Cliffs and U.S. Steel experienced significant gains in pre-market trading. In contrast, South Korean steel manufacturers heavily dependent on exports to the U.S. saw their stock prices decline sharply. Global trade implications. The European Union expressed dissatisfaction, stating it had not been officially notified of the new tariffs and asserting that there was no justification for such measures. Australia also sought exemptions, recalling successful negotiations during Trump's previous presidency. This tariff implementation mirrors Trump's earlier trade actions during his first term, where steel and aluminum tariffs were imposed but later lifted for Canada and Mexico. In this current context, the tariffs come amid ongoing tensions with China, which has already retaliated with its own import controls in response to U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. Timeline of events leading to the announcement. February 2025, Trump hinted at imposing tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods but delayed an official announcement. February 10, 2025, the formal announcement of the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports was made during Trump's flight to the Super Bowl. Upcoming plans for reciprocal tariffs on countries imposing duties on U.S. goods were indicated for announcement shortly after. Differences in coverage. BBC focused on the political ramifications and immediate reactions from Canadian officials. AP News emphasized market reactions and the potential impact on consumer sentiment, particularly concerns about rising inflation due to the tariffs. Reuters highlighted the surge in U.S. steel company stock prices and the contrasting decline seen in South Korean firms. Conclusion. Trump's decision to impose a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum represents a significant shift in U.S. trade policy, with immediate effects on key trading partners and potential long-term implications for global trade dynamics. The announcement has reignited fears of an escalating trade war, particularly with China and other major exporters, while raising concerns about inflation and consumer costs in the U.S. On February 10, 2025, President Donald Trump announced a sweeping 25% tariff on all imported steel and aluminum. This bold move is expected to reshape global trade dynamics significantly, particularly impacting critical trading partners such as Canada and Mexico, which play substantial roles in the U.S. steel and aluminum supply chain. The announcement was made during Trump's flight to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, signaling a dramatic escalation in his trade policy. Counterintuitive information. 1. Immediate market responses. Contrary to what might be expected from such a significant trade policy announcement, shares of U.S. steel companies surged immediately following the tariff announcement. Companies like Cleveland-Cliffs and U.S. Steel saw their stock prices rise sharply, suggesting an optimistic outlook for domestic producers, even as the tariffs could lead to increased costs for consumers in downstream industries reliant on steel and aluminum. 2. Inflation concerns versus market optimism. While the tariffs are expected to lead to higher prices for consumers, potentially fueling inflation. The initial market reaction favored steel producers over concerns of rising consumer costs. This could reflect a belief among investors that the tariffs would protect domestic jobs and industries, even if it leads to higher prices for goods like cars and canned beverages which rely on these materials. 3. Reciprocal tariffs and global discontent. Trump's announcement of potential reciprocal tariffs may seem straightforward, however, it could lead to a tit-for-tat escalation that complicates international relations. Countries like Canada and Mexico, who are immediate targets of these tariffs, have expressed strong discontent, yet the larger implications could lead to broader economic disruptions that may paradoxically hurt U.S. consumers who face retaliatory tariffs on American exports. 4. Historical context of tariffs. The current tariffs echo Trump's earlier tariffs during his first term, which were lifted for Canada and Mexico but remained for the European Union. This suggests a cyclical pattern where tariffs may be used as political tools rather than as stable economic policies. The expectation that the tariffs will lead to long-term benefits for U.S. industries may overlook the historical context where such moves have often resulted in unresolved trade tensions and retaliations that negatively affect both economies involved. 5. Political ramifications beyond economics. Political leaders in Canada criticized the tariffs as chaotic and harmful, indicating that the implications extend beyond economics into the political realm. The interconnectedness of the U.S. and Canadian economies means that U.S. jobs also depend on Canadian steel and aluminum. This counterintuitive relationship challenges the notion that tariffs will solely benefit domestic industries, as retaliatory measures could endanger U.S. jobs dependent on exports and trade relationships. 6. Consumer sentiment and stock market divergence. Data suggesting a decline in consumer sentiment due to tariff announcements contrasts sharply with rising stock prices in the steel sector. This divergence indicates a complex economic landscape where investor optimism does not necessarily align with consumer experiences, revealing a potential disconnect between market performance and everyday economic realities for consumers. 7. China's calculated retaliation. China's retaliation to U.S. tariffs, particularly with controls on rare metal exports, reflects a strategic response that highlights the interdependence of global supply chains. While it may seem that such retaliatory measures would primarily harm the U.S. economy, they could also disrupt global markets in ways that paradoxically benefit certain sectors within the U.S. by creating scarcity and driving prices up, thereby increasing profits for domestic producers. 8. U.S. steel industry's political capital. The steel industry's political influence has historically led to protective measures like tariffs. However, the counterintuitive notion here is that while these measures aim to protect jobs and industries, they may inadvertently stifle innovation and competitiveness in the long run, as companies may rely on protection rather than improving efficiency and reducing costs. 9. Global trade dynamics and future relationships. The tariffs may disrupt existing trade agreements and alliances, leading to unforeseen consequences that could reshape global trade dynamics. The expectation that tariffs will reinvigorate American manufacturing may overlook the potential for retaliatory measures to dismantle long-standing trade relationships, ultimately disadvantaging U.S. exporters in a globalized economy. In conclusion, Trump's imposition of a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum presents a complex landscape of immediate market reactions, historical context, and potential future implications that defy simple economic logic. As global trade dynamics continue to evolve, the counterintuitive nature of these tariffs may lead to outcomes that challenge conventional wisdom regarding trade policy and economic protectionism. The report on President Trump's announcement of a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum reveals several critical aspects that many might overlook but are significant in understanding the broader implications of this policy. 1. Immediate political reactions and economic interdependence. While many reports focus on the economic impact, the swift political reactions from countries like Canada and Mexico are crucial. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford's characterization of the move as chaotic highlights the vulnerability of political relationships that are deeply intertwined with economic ones. The Canadian political advisor Catherine Loubier's assertion that many U.S. jobs rely on imported Canadian steel and aluminum underlines the interconnectedness of the North American economy. This relationship presents a potential backlash against tariffs as political leaders may face domestic pressure to retaliate, which could lead to a cycle of escalating trade wars. Significance: the interdependence of U.S. and Canadian economies suggests that the tariff may not only impact prices but also jobs and political stability in both nations. It may provoke an aggressive response from Canada and Mexico, potentially leading to a trade war that could disrupt supply chains and harm consumers. 2. Reciprocal tariffs and global trade tensions. Trump's mention of reciprocal tariffs is another critical point that may be glossed over. This approach indicates a willingness to escalate trade tensions further. By threatening tariffs on any country that imposes duties on U.S. goods, Trump is signaling a combative stance that could lead to broader international economic conflicts. Significance: this strategy could lead to a domino effect where countries retaliate against U.S. products, potentially crippling various sectors and raising costs for consumers. The broader implications on global trade dynamics could be profound, leading to a fragmentation of international trade relationships and increased costs across various industries. 3. Market reactions and economic health concerns. The immediate market reactions, such as the increase in shares of U.S. steel companies and the decline of South Korean steelmakers, indicate a polarized economic environment. While U.S. steel firms benefit from tariffs, the broader economy may face inflationary pressures as the cost of goods increases. Significance: this dichotomy is crucial as it reflects the short-term gains for certain industries at the potential expense of overall economic health. Higher tariffs may lead to increased prices for consumers, affecting purchasing power and potentially slowing economic growth. Reports of consumer sentiment declining due to tariff concerns further emphasize the potential for widespread economic repercussions that could extend beyond the steel and aluminum industries. 4. Historical context and long-term implications. The report draws parallels with Trump's previous tariffs during his first term, specifically how those were lifted for Canada and Mexico, but not for the EU. This historical context is essential to understand the cyclical nature of trade policies under Trump's administration and their long-term implications. Significance: the cyclical nature suggests that such tariff measures could become a regular feature of U.S. trade policy, leading to unpredictability in international relations. The potential long-term implications include the risk of sustained trade barriers that could hinder global economic recovery, especially in light of post-pandemic challenges. 5. Consumer costs and inflation worries. Among the overlooked details in the report is the potential impact on consumer costs. The anticipation of inflation as a result of increased tariffs is highlighted, but the mechanisms by which this occurs, such as increased production costs being passed down to consumers, are often underestimated. Significance: the rising costs of goods can lead to diminished consumer spending, which is a primary driver of the U.S. economy. As consumers face higher prices for everyday goods, this could lead to an economic slowdown which runs counter to the administration's goals of economic growth and job creation. 6. Geopolitical ramifications. The report mentions responses from global partners such as the EU and South Korea, but does not delve deeply into the geopolitical ramifications of these trade policies. The potential for increased tensions with allies and adversaries alike indicates a broader shift in international relations. Significance: trade is not just an economic issue but a geopolitical one. Strained relations with key allies could weaken collective bargaining positions on global issues including security and climate change, as countries may prioritize national interests over collaborative efforts. Conclusion. In summary, the report on Trump's 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports presents several crucial aspects that warrant deeper consideration. The interdependence of economies. Potential reciprocal tariffs, market reactions, historical precedents, consumer costs, and geopolitical implications are all significant elements that could shape future trade dynamics. Understanding these nuances is essential for comprehending the complex web of global trade and economic relationships that are increasingly vulnerable to political maneuvers. Key points for in-depth analysis and discussion. 1. Immediate impact on trade partners. The implementation of a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum is set to have immediate and profound impacts on major trade partners, particularly Canada and Mexico, which are significant suppliers to the U.S. The swift political backlash from Canadian leaders such as Premier Doug Ford's assertion that the tariffs could harm the Canadian economy underscores the interconnectedness of U.S. and Canadian economies. This point invites discussion on the broader implications of such tariffs on bilateral relations, the potential for retaliatory measures, and the overall effects on jobs and industries that rely on steel and aluminum imports. 2. Reciprocal tariffs and trade war dynamics. Trump's hint at the introduction of reciprocal tariffs indicates a potential escalation in trade tensions. By suggesting that the U.S. will impose duties in response to tariffs from other countries, the administration is setting the stage for a tit-for-tat trade war. This point warrants a deeper analysis of the principles of international trade law, the historical context of trade wars, and the economic ramifications of escalating tariffs on both domestic and global markets. The potential for retaliation could lead to a broader economic fallout affecting not just the steel and aluminum sectors but also other industries. 3. Market reactions and economic consequences. The immediate market reactions following the announcement reflect the complexities of the economic landscape. While shares of U.S. steel companies surged, South Korean steelmakers faced declines. This dichotomy points to the varying impacts of tariffs on different stakeholders within the global supply chain. An examination of how tariffs affect consumer prices, inflation, and stock market dynamics can provide insights into the short-term and long-term economic consequences of such policies. The potential rise in costs for consumers and businesses that rely on imported materials is a critical aspect of this discussion. 4. Historical context and future implications. The current tariffs evoke memories of Trump's earlier trade policies during his first term, creating a continuity in approach that could signal a long-term strategy. The historical context of U.S. tariffs, especially concerning trade relationships with the European Union and China, highlights the cyclical nature of trade disputes. This point invites exploration of the potential long-term implications of these tariffs on global trade dynamics, the evolution of trade agreements, and the shifting landscape of international relations. Understanding the historical precedents can help predict future trends and the likelihood of similar trade policies being adopted by subsequent administrations. These points not only encapsulate the immediate ramifications of Trump's tariff announcement but also set the stage for broader discussions on trade policy, international relations, and economic theory. Each point can be explored in depth to understand the multifaceted nature of global trade dynamics in response to protectionist measures. 1. Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act 1930. In response to the Great Depression, the United States enacted the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which raised duties on over 20,000 imported goods to protect American industries. This move led to a significant decrease in international trade as countries retaliated with their tariffs, worsening the global economic downturn. 2. Section 232 Tariffs on Steel and Aluminum 2018, under President Donald Trump. The U.S. imposed tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum imports, citing national security concerns. This decision sparked widespread global backlash, including retaliatory tariffs from Canada, Mexico, and the European Union, and led to significant disruptions in global supply chains. 3. U.S.-China Trade War 2018 present. The trade conflict between the U.S. and China began when the Trump administration imposed tariffs on Chinese goods to address trade imbalances and alleged intellectual property theft. China responded with its own set of tariffs, leading to a series of escalatory measures and countermeasures that have reshaped global trade dynamics, impacting various industries and economies worldwide. The implementation of a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum by President Donald Trump on February 10, 2025, is set to reshape global trade dynamics significantly. Here are some predictions for the future based on this bold move. 1. Increased tensions with trade partners. The immediate response from Canada and Mexico, the largest steel and aluminum exporters to the U.S., indicates a brewing trade conflict. Expect retaliatory tariffs from these countries as they seek to protect their economies. This could lead to a cycle of escalating tariffs that may involve not just steel and aluminum but other sectors as well. 2. Impact on global supply chains. The tariffs will disrupt established supply chains, particularly for industries reliant on steel and aluminum such as automotive and construction. Companies may be forced to seek alternative suppliers or increase domestic production, potentially leading to increased costs and delays. This shift could favor countries with less reliance on U.S. imports, such as Brazil or India. 3. Inflationary pressures in the U.S. The tariffs are likely to contribute to inflation as the cost of steel and aluminum rises. This impact may extend to consumer goods, including automobiles and packaged goods, pushing prices higher for U.S. consumers. Increased inflation could lead to a decrease in consumer spending, which is critical for economic growth. 4. Market reactions and volatility. U.S. steel companies may initially see a stock market boost, as evidenced by the surge in shares of companies like Cleveland-Cliffs and U.S. Steel. However, volatility is expected as investors react to the broader implications of the tariffs, including potential retaliatory measures and their impact on global trade. This could lead to fluctuating stock prices in related sectors. 5. Strategic adjustments by other nations. Countries such as South Korea and members of the European Union are likely to respond strategically to the tariffs. They may pursue alternative markets or strengthen trade relationships with nations not affected by U.S. tariffs. For instance, the EU might accelerate trade talks with countries in Asia or Africa to mitigate the impact of U.S. trade policies. 6. Potential for trade agreements. The U.S. tariffs may prompt affected countries to seek new trade agreements that exclude U.S. products. This could lead to the formation of trade blocs that prioritize mutual benefits over U.S. interests, thereby reshaping global trade alliances. 7. Domestic economic shifts. The tariffs could lead to a temporary boost in U.S. steel production, but the long-term effects may be negative. Industries that rely heavily on imported metals could face significant challenges, leading to job losses and economic contraction in those sectors. This imbalance may ultimately result in a net loss of jobs across the economy. 8. Long-term trade policy repercussions. Trump's aggressive trade stance may set a precedent for future administrations, leading to a more protectionist U.S. trade policy. This could diminish the U.S.'s role in global trade leadership, as other nations may seek to establish trade norms that do not rely on U.S. participation. 9. Environmental and sustainability considerations. The shift in sourcing steel and aluminum may affect sustainability efforts. Increased domestic production could lead to higher carbon emissions unless coupled with green technologies. This could conflict with global climate goals and lead to international pressure on the U.S. to adhere to environmental standards. 10. Public sentiment and political fallout. As inflation rises and consumer prices increase, public sentiment may turn against the tariffs. This could have political implications for Trump and his administration, especially in swing states where manufacturing jobs are vital. If consumers feel the pinch, it may influence future elections and policy directions. Conclusion. Trump's implementation of tariffs represents a significant shift in U.S. trade policy, likely leading to complex ramifications both domestically and internationally. The potential for retaliatory measures, inflationary pressures, and shifts in global trade dynamics suggests a challenging landscape ahead. Moving forward, businesses and policymakers will need to navigate this evolving situation carefully to mitigate risks and seize new opportunities. The unfolding trade conflict will serve as a litmus test for the resilience of global trade systems and the interconnectedness of modern economies.